What is happening, everybody? It's Saturday night, and welcome to another Stochastic NBA Live Before Lock. We're sponsored by Prize Picks, and as is usual at this point of the season, the injury report is something else. It is very long. There are a lot of players to go through. Neil and I are going to be going game by game to make sure we hit on all of these different spots here. Just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about. Joel Embiid is questionable. James Harden is questionable. De'Aaron Fox is questionable. Those are big names to be on the injury report for a 5-game slate. Neil, how are you doing? And if you guys haven't checked out Neil's Twitter account, at PlayerQDFS, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, go check out PlayerQDFS for one of the wildest parties you will ever see in your entire life. Explain to the people at home what it is you got yourself into last night, Neil.
Yeah, so a friend of mine, one of my law school friends, saw on the Reddit, shitty food porn, it's called, is the Reddit. He saw a bourbon with Uncrustables picture, like somebody eating an Uncrustables, drinking bourbon, and said we need to have a bourbon and Uncrustables pairing party. So we had a party where we just ate some grape Uncrustables, drank some bourbon, drank a little bit too much. I've been in a little bit of pain today, but it was a fun party.
And what else goes into a bourbon and Uncrustables party? It was
Nothing.
You're watching college basketball. Is there anything else happening?
Nope. It was literally just that. We sat around, ate some Uncrustables, drank a lot of bourbon. We had a bunch of different types of bourbon. So like theoretically we were, doing a bourbon tasting, but we didn't really do the whole like read up on the history of the bourbon and that kind of stuff like you might do with a wine tasting. It was really just an excuse to hang out.
Yeah, and I mean, how fancy could you be when you're washing down, Uncrustables with bourbon? But I am curious, which flavor of bourbon goes best with the Uncrustable?
Ooh, so we had some wild turkey. I'd say was pretty good. I enjoyed I'm trying to even remember what the bourbons were that I was drinking. I'll go with wild turkey because I know that was one of them, and I know it was good.
All right. I like how you're just guessing. It's like
I am pretty much guessing. Yeah.
If there was any doubt that Neil had too much to drink last night, it was me asking him what was your favorite bourbon yesterday, and him just being like, I have no clue what I.
They all hurt me. Yeah.
It's the true life of the flannel god himself. And let's see what people in the YouTube chat have to say about your food choices here.
They all seem very pro, from what I can tell. Everybody's on board, going to have a similar party.
Yeah, not unsurprising because we do have a very sophisticated audience like ourselves, who I think we're like-minded. We have some similar tastes. Let's see, what do we have in Uncrustables? Our fire. Yeah, there's no reason that we should be eating differently within reason in our 30s and 40s than we did when we were kids. Why not?
Right.
Like why do we have to pretend we don't like those great foods anymore?
It was delicious.
Dude, I would eat the shit out of Lunchables if I knew where they were still sold.
Yeah, I don't know either. Lunchables are not my favorite. There's plenty of other things that I liked as a kid that I would still eat though.
Yeah, I don't know what Lunchables tastes like anymore, but I remember liking them a lot as a kid. But let's get into this NBA slate. And also, once again, guys, shout out to Prize Picks, who is the sponsor of our show today. If you guys haven't signed up at Prize Picks yet, if you use the link below to sign up, you're going to get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit and 1 free month of Stochastic Plus Platinum. Pretty good incentive to sign up over at Prize Picks using our link. My MMA lineups being on the screen in front of me are not going to help me to start talking about basketball. Very tilted that we had a fight canceled mid-card, which has been happening, unfortunately. Yep. Decent amount lately, but that did happen. Manel Kappen, Alex Perez, who I believe this is the 14th time Perez has pulled out of a fight, which
seriously? I was not aware.
Absolutely real is that he's pulled out of 14 fights now, but we'll get over that. Talk about NBA now, starting with Jorge Jacomi did leave us a super chat, and he says 20 lineups today. Who would you go with? Embiid, Jokic, or Giannis? And who's the worst chalk player today? All right, so let me look at the lineups that I have built. Here's what makes this part of the season really annoying. To me, right now, the answer is Jokic. He's the one that when I build out lineups, I get the most exposure to. But there is a world where we right now have James Harden questionable and Joel Embiid questionable. There is a world where Joel Embiid doesn't play today and James Harden looks like a great pay-up option. There's a world where James Harden doesn't play and Embiid does, and Embiid looks like a great pay-up option. So we are going to have to be flexible with some of the decisions we make here. As of now, the answer for me is Jokic. He's the one that I get the most exposure to. So I'm going to start by asking you that part of the equation, Neil. If as of right now you could only spend up for one player, who would you choose?
Man, it's so tough. So, I mean, Embiid has such a great matchup with this version of the Suns with no DeAndre Ayton going up against Bismack Biyombo. I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of holding off a spot for that game for whichever of Embiid or Harden, assuming that one of them plays and one of them doesn't. That would be the hope. Holding out a spot for wishing for one of them to play without the other, and then there's going to be a smash. So I kind of want to play Embiid just because he could be in there without Harden against this Phoenix team. This Phoenix front court would be interesting. It's really tough though. Jokic actually, the correct answer is Jokic. I should just say that, like off the top, like looking at our boom bust tool, we're projecting him for 28% ownership, 33% chance to be an optimal. So I'm with you that Jokic is probably the right answer here, but Embiid does really intrigue me from a GPP standpoint, just because great matchup against this version of the Suns front court, and he could be playing without Harden, so he'll become interesting.
And I presume because you had your crazy, banger of a party last night, you didn't play last night's NBA slate. But by chance, did you play last night's NBA slate?
I did play last night's NBA.
Oh wow,
slate.
look at
you.
you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I was on the deeper dive. So as long as I'm already doing all that prep, I might as well. Not that it's a ton of prep, but I've talked about it for an hour. I want to see what happens. So I played.
So the reason I was going to bring that up is I had a really good slate yesterday. But the reason I did my thing yesterday, I didn't play any of the first games of the slate. And I just waited for news. I got to play all of this tremendous value last night that the field just didn't play. I had my most rostered pay up option yesterday was Anthony Davis. He was like 10% owned. I got a ton of Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder being, I think it was like 13% owned, 14%. I forget the exact number. It was somewhere around there. Absolutely egregious that he only had that ownership. But it was because so many people were loading up on the Toronto Raptors. People were loading up on the Washington Wizards yesterday. So I had a great slate just by waiting for news. It kind of makes it hard to sit here sometimes and be like, here's who I'm playing, because I don't know. I'm just waiting for some of the news to break. But we did walk through, some of the different iterations of what could happen if different guys were ruled out. And it ended up being a really successful night for me. But as we are going to get in, well, actually, one sec. We'll answer the other part of Jorge's question, and then I'm going to get into the first game of this slate, because he did ask one other part, which is, who was the worst chalk player today? So based on the current ownership, we could look at the boom bust tool as well, Neil. Yep. Who is the player that you think on DraftKings is the most overowned? Crazy enough, for a 5-game slate, there's not an immense amount of chalk. There's 2 players projected for north of 27% ownership.
Yeah, so maybe I need to refresh because I'm seeing a few. Kevin Huerter, just looking at the boom bust tool. Is Kevin Huerter, did he play the most recent game?
I'm going to refresh, but the last...
I'm also refreshing.
Yeah, so the last ownership update is from 7 minutes ago. We've got Chris Dunn at 32% ownership, Kevin Love at 31%, and the next most popular is Bam Adebayo at 27.8. So there's not really that much crazy highly owned players to talk about.
No, there's not. So I refreshed, and it is now, I'm missing some data here in the, I think sometimes it takes, a minute, and then I have to refresh again and it'll all be there. But I am currently missing some data. I was seeing Kevin Huerter looking like he was getting like 27% ownership with a 16% chance to be an optimal. At that case, it would be him, but sounds like that was not correct. So
he's still pretty popular though. We've got Huerter as the 1, 2, 3. I'm showing off my counting skills right here. 6th really most popular player on the entire slate. I did that all in my head while talking. 6. Yeah. So Kevin Huerter, I don't think he's a bad choice there. 27.5% ownership for him at $5,400 on DraftKings. Let me see. How much Huerter did I get to in my dummy builds that I have here? Yeah, I have 10% of Huerter right now. I don't think he's a bad choice for that at all as the most overowned player.
Yeah, I'll go with it.
Yeah, let me see if there's anybody else I would answer here. I do have my rivalry with him, but putting that aside, I think you can make a case for Jimmy Butler, not because the price point is bad or anything like that, but I do think he's a little bit overowned as of now. We've got Jimmy Butler projected for 24.5% ownership, and he's taking up a lineup spot in the first game of the night.
Right.
So that's something else too that will likely have me underweight to the field on Butler.
Yeah, I would imagine I'm going to be underweight to the field on Butler as well. Yeah, it's a good one.
So let's start. Well, actually, let me check to make sure there's no more super chats here, which there are not. So let's go. And by the way, good point by somebody in chat who brought up, who was it that said, it was actually Brandon Katz. So I'm going to give him credit here. He said that Huerter is underpriced and undervalued if Fox is out. The thing is that Fox is not out right now, and I currently have Fox in, but I will agree with you that Huerter quickly becomes good chalk if we end up finding out that Fox is not able to play, but he is currently questionable.
Yep, for sure.
So do need to wait on some of those injury news, but let's start by talking about the first game of the slate, the Brooklyn Nets against the Miami Heat. And just to get into this before we get into the player by player and team by team, how apt are you going to be to leave players from the first game of the slate out of your player pool just to make sure you have that flexibility? Because we do have a pretty big gap in the start times of games today.
Yeah, and it's not a great game environment at all. This
Mm-hmm.
Miami and Brooklyn, there's not a lot to love from this game. So I think I'm going to be leaning towards saving some roster spots rather than playing many players from the first game. There's really just not that many players who look great from the first game. I'm guessing we're going to find some positively leveraged plays just because they don't project all that well. So some of these players aren't going to get much ownership, and maybe we'll have some positive leverage. But in general, I think I'm going to be holding off most of my roster spots for later in the night.
That's what I would like to do as well, particularly if we don't get any of this news that comes out. It's something that's a pretty regular practice for myself anyway, but we're going to start by talking about the Nets, who also don't really have anybody on the injury report. Seth Curry's out, but that doesn't necessarily really move the needle for me in any kind of real significant way. The total for this game is 221.5. It is the lowest of the entire day. The first game of the slate, which is already over, the Atlanta Hawks Indiana Pacers game, the total closed at 249.5. Just want to throw that out there for how massive that total is. But this game, 28 points less. Nets against the Miami Heat. So starting on the Nets side of the game, is there anything that's really standing out to you here, Neil?
No, there's no great plays from the Nets. I think there are some fine GPP plays like Spencer Dinwiddie. If you want to play him at 8,300, he can spike a ceiling. He actually looks good in the boom bust tool. 7.3% projected ownership, 9% chance of booming, 9% chance of being optimal. So a little bit of leverage there, but it's about as tough of a matchup as you can hope for. He doesn't project all that well. We've got him at a 4.5x value, projecting for 37 fantasy points at 8,300. But yeah, I think he is a fine GPP play just because the ownership's not going to be there for an 8,300 Spencer Dinwiddie against the Heat. And he's a good enough NBA player that he can still spike an upside. The type of upside that you need on a 5-game slate in particular. Like you don't necessarily need 60 out of Dinwiddie at 8,300 on a 5-game slate. He could get to 48, and maybe that's enough on this slate. So I think that Dinwiddie is a fine play. Mikal Bridges kind of similar, same idea. He's 7,100, a little bit cheaper, easier to spike that upside. I'd say both of those are playable. Nick Claxton actually looks pretty good, 5x value. We're projecting for 33 fantasy points at 6,600. So maybe Claxton would actually be the first player that I would play from the Nets, but none of these guys are like high priorities for me.
Yeah, and by the way, because there's some confusion in the chat, apparently DraftKings might be saying that Fox is out. Fox is questionable officially. It's so right now in our projections, we are assuming that Fox is in. That's generally what we do with questionable players. I don't have a strong lean if Fox is going to be in or out, but he is officially questionable. He's not out, as some people are currently proclaiming in the chat. If I had to roster one player from the Nets today, it would be Mikal Bridges, just because he's shown to have a ceiling. He takes a ton of shots for this Nets team, and he looks like a legitimate all-star right now. Like, he looks like somebody who, you're not going to say that the Nets are going to feel great that they traded for Kevin Durant. You're not going to say that the Suns are going to look back and regret trading for Kevin Durant. But there's a scenario here where Mikal Bridges turns into a really, really, really good player. You know what I think this could potentially be? Do you remember when James Harden got traded to the Rockets from the Thunder?
And the Thunder got a million picks, and yeah, I remember.
But the other part is when he was on the Thunder, he was third wheel, right? He was behind Russell Westbrook. He was behind Kevin Durant at the time. He was coming off the bench. So a lot of people knew that James Harden was really good, but I don't think people really knew exactly how good James Harden was. Mikal Bridges, I think, could kind of be a similar type story where he was behind Chris Paul, he was behind Devin Booker, he was behind DeAndre Ayton in terms of where the usage was going for the Phoenix Suns. And now you see him traded to another spot where he could be the guy on offense. I think we could really see him turn into a star. So if I had to roster one guy from the Nets today, it would be Mikal Bridges, particularly at his DraftKings price point, $9,100. I mean, $7,100. I think that's pretty reasonable. And then if you look at his FanDuel price point, $7,800, it's still okay, but the $7,100 on DK is clearly much more favorable, especially with the 3-point shooting he's been doing as of late. So Bridges, if I had to take somebody from the Nets, are there
I like that call. Sorry.
No, all good. Are there any deep tournament flyers you like from Brooklyn?
Not really. Actually, we had Cam Thomas with positive leverage. I don't know. I don't know that I'm going to go there anyway, though. Let's see. Yeah, Cam Thomas, we have at 0.3% ownership, 4.5% chance to be an optimal. He's only 3,000. Maybe that's just a matter of he's shooting guard eligible at the min. You don't really need that much potentially for Cam Thomas to be optimal, but still, he just doesn't project all that well. We've got him in for just 12 minutes and 11 fantasy points. I guess he's feasible. Just based on the boom bust tool. If the boom bust is telling me that he's got a 4.5% chance to be an optimal, I have to at least think about playing him, but it's probably not in a lot of lineups. I don't know that I'll actually get there. Dayron Sharp, kind of a similar story. We've got him in for about 17 fantasy points at 3,500. Looks fine. You could play some Dorian Finney-Smith. He should get. We're projecting for 25 minutes. He's 4,300. None of these guys are people that I love. I think we're probably going to find better plays from later games. I do agree with you actually that Mikal Bridges is an interesting play. I know you said that's only if you had to play somebody from this game, you would play him. So not like a ringing endorsement, but I do think that he is interesting at 7,100 as kind of the alpha on this team. So I will back you on that too.
So the other thing too about Cam, by the way, Cam Thomas has been a DMP coach's decision for the last 2 games. You just say Cam Thomas, not Cam Johnson, correct?
Cam Thomas, yeah.
Okay. So Cam Thomas has been a DMP coach's decision the last 2 games. Seth Curry is out. Maybe that opens up some playing time. He is really, really risky to play because I still think one of the more likely scenarios here is that he's just not in the Nets rotation because while Seth Curry is out, Curry the last 2 games only played 6 and 9 minutes. Maybe those minutes go to Cam Thomas, but I also think there's a fairly likely scenario that he just plays 0 minutes because Cam Thomas, who earlier in the month, I called him a flash in the pan. And some Nets fans got very, very upset at me and said it means I clearly don't watch basketball. Well, now he's not even in the rotation anymore. Do you remember that stretch that Cam Thomas had?
I do remember because I kept fading him and he kept doing so well and I hated it.
He scored 40 points for 2 weeks every night. We got Cam Thomas 40 point games every night. But unfortunately, he's a fairly low efficient scorer with no other dimensions to his game. Not a good defensive player, doesn't play make for other players. So he's kind of fallen out of the rotation. Long story short there, I'm not going to be playing Cam Thomas today. And I understand that maybe he gets into the rotation in the absence of Seth Curry, but I'll take my chances elsewhere. Is there anything else you want to talk about from the Brooklyn Nets?
No, I think we've covered them pretty well.
All right, so let's move on to the Miami Heat. And I do think the Miami Heat are slightly more interesting than the Nets side of the game, mostly because Bam Adebayo is so cheap. So I haven't really decided what I'm going to do with Adebayo because if I had to play one player from this game, it would be Bam, 7,500. Kevin Love also a fine value play. He's projecting for a bunch of ownership, but I'm fairly certain I'm just going to take Kevin Love out of my player pool. We'll get to that more in depth in a second, but he's projected for a lot of ownership, and it's because as we look at the slate right now, there's no value. But if we start to see James Harden, Joel Embiid, De'Aaron Fox rolled out later, and then a bunch of value is going to open up. So it's kind of this weird scenario where as things stand right now, yeah, Love looks decent, but he's somebody who, if we had all the information that we might have later on the day at the start of the slate, nobody would want to play Kevin Love. So right now, I have him projected for a little over 20 fantasy points at $3,900 on DraftKings. Makes him okay, but this is so much ownership going to Kevin Love. So I want to ask you, what are you going to do with Kevin Love, given all the ownership that's going to him?
Yeah, it's tough because he played 23 and 24 minutes the past 2 games. Like that, if you can spike that kind of minutes upside, he would look really good. But he's 3,900. The ownership does scare me away. I think I'll have some Kevin Love, but I'm going to try to be underweight to the field.
Yeah, and right now, just given what his ownership is, if this doesn't change, I would not be rostering him. The one player I said that I can't get away from right now from the Heat, though, this is the one player I feel like I need some exposure to in the first game of the slate. Bam Adebayo is $7,500 on DK, and it's a really cheap price for Bam, who's just been playing much better lately. And we saw a really long stretch from him where just the usage wasn't really there. The fantasy points weren't there. Here's one thing that's really changed for him, though. As we're in the situation where the Heat are really fighting to avoid the play-in game, Bam is playing massive minutes. Last handful of games, 40 minutes, 39, 34, 33, 37, 42, 37. In those kinds of minutes, and with Bam's price having come down, he's such a strong guy to get to. FanDuel, there's a little more opportunity cost because he's only center eligible and he's 8,100, but I still like getting to him there. But Bam Adebayo, to me, is a piece of chalk that I'm still going to be rostering from the first game of the slate. Do you like getting to Bam despite the ownership?
Yeah, he was actually the one piece I was keeping me from saying that I'm going to fade the first game, because Bam looks fantastic in our tools, both from a value perspective. He has 5.6x value. We're projecting him for over 41 and a half fantasy points at 7,500. He's tied with a couple others as the best value currently on the slate, which that's going to change, assuming that some value opens up with injuries. Usually the top value will be like 7x or something, but 5.6x for a player at 7,500 is really good. So Bam, from a value perspective, looks great. But then also in the boom bust tool, we have him with 28% projected ownership, 32% chance to be an optimal, 41% chance of booming. So he actually has positive leverage on top of being one of the best values on the slate, which you actually don't see that often. Usually if somebody is like a really great value, if they're like one of the best values on the slate, the field is going to be playing a ton of them. And that is not what we're anticipating with Bam. So I like Bam quite a bit.
And there's also this narrative that Bam has been bad this year relative to other years. His numbers are nearly identical to last year over the full course of the season. He did have this stretch where he wasn't good, and he wasn't great in the playoffs last year. So I think that kind of clouds people's judgment. But listen to the comparison of his fantasy stats this year compared to last year, Neil.
Yep.
This season, he's averaging 41.07 DraftKings points per game. Last year, 40.54. Pretty similar looking numbers there. His usage rate this year is 25.4%. Last year, it was 25%. His scoring is slightly up this year. He's averaging 21 points per game compared to 19 last year. His rebounds are down a little bit, 9 rebounds per game compared to 10.1 last year. This is by and large part the same player, but there's like a weird negative stink around him where people just seem to like Bam less that I can't really figure out why. I guess it's because he's been streaky, but the price is just too cheap on him. So I like getting to Bam. He's the one player from this game who I feel like I can't go without unless something totally crazy was to break in the next 30 minutes for value.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's the one that if you are going to play one player from this game, it would be Bam for me. Jimmy Butler looks fine, 5.1x value at 8,700. It's fine. We're projecting him for 44 fantasy points at 8,700. Good enough on a 5-game slate, but not like a priority like Bam is. Kevin Love, decent value, but I agree with you. Like there's a pretty good chance that more value is going to open up later, and you would regret having Kevin Love in your lineups. My only hesitation with full fading Kevin Love is we're only projecting him for 20 minutes and 20 and a half fantasy points. He has, as I said, played 23 and 24 minutes the past 2 games. So if he does spike that, at 3,900, say he has Kevin Love has major upside in 24 minutes if he get there. So I'm hesitant to fully fade him, but 32% ownership is a lot. So I do think that probably it'd be a good decision to fade Kevin Love. Like I'm not full fading him. I agree with you though that I'd rather wait for more value in a majority of my lineups.
Yeah, and once again, I'm not going to be playing Kevin Love, or at the very least, I won't be playing very much of Kevin Love. My current build, I have 0% of him, but if we end up getting to a point in the slate where it's, 2 hours from now and everybody who's questionable ends up playing, I'm going to feel like an idiot. That's because then I'm going to be like, well, I wish I would have played some of those guys that look decent from the first game of the slate. Kind of how I felt at the start yesterday, where people are mocking me. They're going like, oh, you didn't play Kristaps Porzingis. At the end of the day, I felt pretty good that I had 72 fantasy points from Joel Embiid and 60 fantasy points from Anthony Davis, as opposed to the 48 fantasy points from Porzingis. It was nice. Right? He had a good game, but it wasn't good relative to the players that opened up later on in the slate. And that's how I'm hoping today is going to play out as well.
Yesterday, my big, not mistake, but I played a ton of Vooch, because Vooch, I was playing the narrative of playing against a small center, and he did great. He put up 49 fantasy points, but then lost like 6 minutes to the blowout. So he put up 49 fantasy points in I think under 30 minutes, was just absolutely crushing. But then didn't end up getting fourth quarter run. And then of course Embiid going off. It was like, okay, 49, that's great, but it's not enough on that slate. So that bit me.
And we've got some questions in Discord to hit on. Then we'll wrap up talking about the Miami Heat. This one is coming from, it would help if I pressed the right button in Discord. Here we go. First from Hef Love, who's saying, I'm just getting here. I hope you didn't have too much cap. So I did not have very much Manel cap. I had a ton of Alex Perez. I thought this was a great matchup for him. I thought that he was going to win as an underdog. So Hef Love, I got screwed, but not because I played a lot of cap. It was because of the other side. Super chat from Lippy. How many centers are you playing in your lineups on DK? I have 2, Jokic and Sabonis. It's going to depend what also ends up happening with news later on in the day. I have some exposure to Trey Lyles and then Bam Adebayo as well. But in terms of the guys that I have the most exposure to at center right now, it is Jokic and Bam. And then I assume Sabonis would be somebody who's in that mix as well later when De'Aaron Fox news comes out, if he is to end up being ruled out. But I want to ask you, For your centers, is there anybody else, if you made any builds, that you get a significant amount of exposure to on DK?
So I have not actually made any builds yet. So let me look.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I just ran my first crunch and I got, and this is before I've done much, just a little bit of randomness on ton of Jokic, ton of Bam. I'm actually getting a good amount of Jock Landale and Udoka Azubuike. Those are the four centers that I get without adjusting projections or anything like that.
Yeah, and then I mean, there's so much to get changed with injury news here as well. Like, Joel Embiid's questionable, James Harden's questionable. Both of them end up sitting. Like, that's going to be some more front court value that ends up opening up. But for right now, the only player in the early, well, I mean, I might not have too many center spots available if we get the news too late, because I'm going to be playing Bam and I'm going to be getting exposure to Jokic as well. I feel like those are two guys that I do need some amount of exposure to. Let's talk about the rest of the guys on the Heat. We talked about the two most chalky players. We talked about Jokic. I mean, we talked about Bam Adebayo. We talked about Kevin Love. Who else from the Heat is standing out to you, if anybody?
Yeah, so no priorities here, but Jimmy Butler looks fine at 8,700. Max Strus looks fine at 4,000. We've got him in for 27 minutes, almost 20 fantasy points. Could get hot and put up a score that you want. Kyle Lowry, yeah, Tyler Herro. We didn't talk about Tyler Herro at all. He also looks fine. 6,700 price tags, playable at 6,700. We've got him in for 34 fantasy points. He looks, I'd say, similar to Jimmy Butler. Like you know that both these guys have it in them to crush their price tag, but it's not the best matchup and not a place that I'm prioritizing.
Yeah, and like I said, Jimmy Butler. Before we're going over own players, he was somebody I shouted out there, not because I think he's terrible on a points per dollar basis, but he's fairly popular. And I think he looks okay. But once again, potential for much better plays to open up later. So I think there's a lot of these guys from the Heat that are fairly priced. They're just picking up too much ownership because of the lack of value we have right now. So if we go through some of these players from the Heat, you know, there's ownership, a lot of ownership actually going to Max Strus, Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry's picking up some ownership today. But we're doing Kyle Lowry again?
Yeah,
really?
I don't think I want to. I got 6.7% in my first crunch. Don't love it. I agree with you. So I will say that I like overall, I agree with you that we want to mostly fade this game, I think.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And hopefully the injury news breaks our way. But the other thing, too, about this time of the season that we see happen all the time, there's always some sort of injury news. Like, the real upset is if there's a slate that doesn't have unforeseen injury news. Like, even yesterday, right? Eric and I go into the show, and there's a million players listed as questionable on the injury report. And what happens? As soon as the show starts, somebody who's not on the injury report, Malcolm Brogdon, gets ruled out.
That's right.
So I feel fairly confident somebody is going to get ruled out, even if we don't know exactly who it is going to be, at least as of now.
Yeah.
Got a question in Discord from Hannah Banana. Hannah wants to know DK tiers, please. Yeah, I'll run through the DK tiers for you. And there are some interesting decision points we have to make for tiers with the amount of players that are listed as questionable. So for tier one, my favorite option is Nikola Jokic. But if you got the stones for it, to roll out Joel Embiid, you hope Embiid plays, you hope Harden sits and get a real differential play. But I think that Jokic is definitely the safest option, the guy, at least as of now, we want to be playing. Tier two, for me, that is going to be Kawhi Leonard playing without Paul George. He had a ton of usage in the last game, and Kawhi looks healthy. It's been a really long time since we've seen him look like peak Kawhi. I think he's back to that guy. So I like Kawhi in tier two. Also, note that James Harden is in tier two. If you get the scenario where James Harden plays and Joel Embiid sits, Harden would look fantastic there. Tier three, I get to the most of De'Aaron Fox right now. Another dicey one. He's questionable, but if he ends up playing, I think he looks really good. If not De'Aaron Fox, if you don't feel comfortable with this questionable tag, I think Jimmy Butler is the next best option. Tier four, I like Bam Adebayo. Tier five, that is Mikal Bridges for me. And then tier six is currently Aaron Gordon. So Hannah, hope that helps you build out your tiers lineups. And anything else you want to talk about from the Heat before we move on from that game, Neil?
I think we can move on.
All right, let's move on to the next game then, which is the Milwaukee Bucks against the Denver Nuggets. And this should be a decent spot for Giannis. Potential for a short slate where we get a lot of players ruled out. But there are so many good pay-up options that I'm just not really getting to Giannis because there's other guys I prioritize on the high end, Jokic being one of them. Embiid would be another one if Harden gets ruled out. Harden could be one if Embiid is ruled out. Am I making a mistake, in your opinion, by not playing much of Giannis?
I mean, he's getting 10% ownership. So he's going a little bit low owned relative to what you can usually expect from Giannis on a 5-game slate. I don't know that I call it it's not a big mistake. I'll say that. I'd probably want to get to, so I also got to 0. He doesn't project nearly as well as Jokic. So that's part of the issue, is that he just like, you've got to juice your projections if you want to get to any Giannis or Embiid, frankly, because Jokic just projects so much better than everybody. But it could be a competitive game. It wouldn't be that shocking to see Giannis pick up a few extra minutes. So I think it's, if you're playing 150 lineups, I would say it's a mistake to not play any Giannis. But if you're playing, 20 lineups and you want to take that stand, I think that's fine. Just know that you're putting yourself at some risk here, just because Giannis can absolutely shatter the slate. But 10% ownership, I'm curious where he actually looks in the boom bust. So I'm going to pull that up real quick.
Yeah, while you go check that out, for me, it's also I just have Giannis so far behind guys like Jokic from a projection standpoint. Let me see, what's the difference I have between them? If I pull up all of the players,
we do too. The stochastic team has Giannis at 54, Jokic at 62.5.
Yeah, and
that's a big difference.
54.1 for Giannis, 63.4 for Jokic, right? So, I mean, nearly a 10 fantasy point difference between the two of them. It's hard for me to overlook that, especially when you consider that Jokic is cheaper of the two on DraftKings.
I know. Yeah, and Jokic is cheaper than Embiid too, and Embiid also is 6 fantasy points behind him. It's Jokic projects great, but we know that Embiid and Giannis are going to beat Jokic a good amount of the time, despite the projection. So I do think you want to mix in some of the other studs, even though maybe you want to play more of Jokic. But I think if you're playing enough lineups, you do want to mix in these other studs that can just beat him straight up raw points wise.
Got a super chat from Eric's Tears who's saying pace clock check. So I don't want to get people, I don't want to break too many walls down. But when I have to cover a lot of time for a slate that doesn't have very many games, I prefer to take my time, because here's what it's easier to do. It's easier to speed up later in the show than it is to slow. It's easier to speed up than it is to slow down and be like, oh no, we've one game left and 30 minutes to kill. Yeah. So Eric's Tears, I appreciate you. I'll take a sip of you right here, because everybody knows the best beverage in the industry is Eric's Tears. It's salty. It's got electrolytes in it. It keeps you at high energy throughout the show. So thank you, Eric's Tears, for the super chat. But I know what I'm doing here. It's also, for a 5-game slate, it's an hour and a half. It can become a lot of time. We're leaving no stone uncovered, whether it be players at the end of the bench, whether it be what happened with Neil's Uncrustables. We cover it all on the show when there's 5
That's
games.
Right. Yeah, we're doing just fine.
There's some good Eric's Tears right there. Oh, Cowboy Cerrone inducted into Hall of Fame. Like to see that. We just got the starting lineup for the Miami Heat. The Heat starting lineup is Vincent, Hero, Butler, Love, Adebayo. So nothing that's unexpected there, but still just wanted to bring up that we officially got that starting lineup. And from the Nets, Dinwiddie, Bridges, Johnson, Finney, Smith, Claxton. So there we go. That is the starting line for the first couple of games of the slate. No real surprises there, but just wanted to make sure that we covered that. Getting back to the Milwaukee Bucks, we talked about Giannis. He's going to be difficult for me to get to just based on the other options that we have available on the high end. But how about the secondary stars for the Milwaukee Bucks, Neil? Between Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, these guys are projected for almost no ownership. Should they be getting more ownership?
I don't know that they should. They just don't project all that well point per dollar. Like, I think they're fine GPP plays, but Drew Holiday is up at 7,800. Middleton all the way up to 7,700 now. Finally, that price tag caught up with him. Brook Lopez just does not project well at all at 7,000. So no, I wouldn't say it's a mistake to fade any of these other secondary options. I think that's a lot more reasonable, in my opinion, than fading Giannis. If you're playing 50 lineups and you completely full fade Giannis, I would call that a mistake. I would not call it a mistake to full fade Middleton, Holiday, anybody else on the Bucks.
And are there any guys outside of the core dudes that you would consider worthwhile, whether it be Bobby Portis, his price is down a little bit. He's terrible from points per dollar perspective. Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton, they're relatively cheap. And anything to see there?
Not really. I think you could play some Grayson Allen just because he's 4,300. We're projecting him for 27 minutes. Only 18 fantasy points we've got him projected for, but he's another player. If he gets hot, he could obviously exceed that 4,300 price tag. But yeah, no. Not really. Nobody that I have really much interest in on Milwaukee outside of Giannis. And then if you want to sprinkle in some Middleton, Holiday, Lopez, I'm not getting to any Bobby Portis. We only have him in for 22 minutes here. So yeah, no real priorities here.
Let's tell the people the easiest way to make money tonight, Neil. How does that sound to you?
Yeah.
Easy money? Easy money. Have you
Under the
been on any
bridge.
shows where we've talked about it? This new Bet365 deal?
Yeah, Lofty and I were talking about it yesterday. I wish that it applied to more states. I wish it was available here in Minnesota, but it's a great deal for the people in those 4 states, and maybe a drive away from those states too.
I was doing the ad read yesterday, and somebody told me who lives near Virginia who's going to drive there to collect some free money because
Yep.
here is the deal with Bet365. And unfortunately, like Neil said, this only applies to people who live in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, or Virginia. But the reason we're still reading this off on shows is because it's such good value. We just want to present it to you guys. But if you sign up at Bet365 using the link that we have below, you bet $1 and they give you $365 in bonus bets. $1 into $365 in bonus bets. You just have to make a minimum deposit of $10. This is the easiest money you guys are going to be able to make. Really good way to help start building up your bankroll. So sign up at Bet365 using this deal, because who doesn't want $365 in bonus bets for $1? It's a pretty good offer. You guys should be taking advantage of it. If you have not already, sign up clicking on the link that we have below. Now let's move on to the other side of this game and the Denver Nuggets. I'm getting to a ton of exposure to Nikola Jokic. Jokic actually, as of now, is my most rostered player on the entire slate. So he's my favorite pay-up option, Neil. It seems like you were on the same page as me before, but how aggressive do we want to get with our exposure to him?
So actually, I cut back on his projection because I was getting to 90% Jokic before I made any adjustments to the projection. I cut him back to 61 fantasy points just so I can get under 50%. I think if you want to play over 50%, that's fine. But I'd rather get, a little bit under 50%, I think, of Jokic is where I'm intending to be. He projects so much better than everybody else. Most likely he's going to end up being, not most likely he's going to end up being the highest scoring player on the site. I don't think I would say that. Would you say that? Do you think Jokic is do you think is greater than 50% odds that Jokic ends up as the highest scoring player on the slate?
No, just because there's so many guys.
I wouldn't either. Yeah, exactly.
And there's still the scenario where Fox get ruled out and Sabonis would project a lot better. The other thing too is if Harden gets ruled out and Embiid plays, that in itself becomes a 50-50 proposition between Embiid and Jokic.
Good point.
So I wouldn't say 50%, but I would say that as of now, he's the most likely to be the highest scorer.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and that's, bears out in the projections. He's projected for over 62 fantasy points. As we said, more than 6 points on the next best projected player on the entire slate. And he's cheaper than Embiid and Giannis. So a lot of reason to love Jokic. Just from a point per dollar perspective, he looks fantastic. It's a great game environment against Milwaukee. Should be competitive the whole game. So a lot of reason to love Jokic here. But as you said, I don't think that there's a greater than 50% chance that he does end up as the highest scoring player on the slate. So I'm not going to try to have him in more than 50% of lineups. I'm going to shoot for just under 50%, though, I think.
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, it's less than I have. It's not unreasonable, though. I might lower my exposure to him a little bit as we get closer to lock here. But yeah, right now, it's funny because you said you had 90% of Jokic before. Well, in my current build, I also have 90% of Nikola Jokic. And maybe as we get closer to his game locking, I'll bring that down a little bit. But I do anticipate that he will be one of my, if not my most rostered players of the entire night. Now, as for the other players on Denver, I think a bunch of the other ones as well. So we haven't really found many spots that we like so far. We found a lot of spots we don't like. Those are easy to find. But as for the other players on the team, I like getting Jamal Murray. I like getting Darren Gordon. I even like getting to guys right now like Bruce Brown Jr. Right. So this is the team that I'm getting the most exposure to at the moment. Do you like these other pieces from Denver as well?
Yeah, I have to imagine this is also the team that I'm getting the most exposure to right now. And it is earlier than most of the games in the slate, but it's at least an hour after lock, so we can adjust as we probably get some more information. Currently, I have, so in my latest run, I have just under 50% Jokic. I also have 67% Jamal Murray, 43% Aaron Gordon, 27% Michael Porter, 23% Bruce Brown. Just shows you how well they project point per dollar. Because again, this is without me doing anything to their projections, with the exception of Jokic. Just getting to a ton of these guys, they project really well point per dollar. You got to imagine that there's some possibility that they actually pick up extra minutes here too in a competitive game. Like we only have Aaron Gordon in there for 29 and a half minutes. And we've got him project for over 30 fantasy points at 6,000. So he looks great. I don't know that I'm going to stick to the percentages that I have right now. And obviously, if we get news where more value opens up elsewhere, it's probably going to lead to less of some of these mid-range plays and more of the studs. But yeah, I think they're all, really, really strong point per dollar options. Aaron Gordon, I'd say obviously Jokic being my favorite play on the slate, but I do think Jamal Murray at just 24% ownership, I'm probably going to end up above that, even if I do cut back on what I have. Same thing for Aaron Gordon at projecting for 20% ownership. He projects really well. Michael Porter Jr. I'm going to end up overweight to the field, I would guess, on at least those four. And then Bruce Brown, I have a good amount on this latest crunch. I think that probably better value is going to open up. So I'm probably going to lose some of my Bruce Brown and my Contavious Caldwell Pope. But for now, he's one of the better value options on the slate.
Totally agree. Is there anything else you want to talk about from the Denver Nuggets?
Yeah, so I mentioned right at the end, KCP. I got 7% of KCP. I think he's fine. He's 4,600. We've got him projected for just over 21 fantasy points. Can obviously spike a little bit of an upside on top of that $4,600 price tag. So he looks fine, but nobody else that I'm playing from Denver.
We are at the point of the show where I have an alarming amount of tabs in front of me, and it's hard to manage all of them. So I'm going to close out some of these while I talk through and introduce our next game. And the next one, the Utah Jazz against the Sacramento Kings. Now we're going to get into the spot of the slate where there's going to be a lot of injury news, and it's going to be hard to kind of parse it until we get more information. At least on the Utah side, we do know who's going to be out for them. Jordan Clarkson's out. He's been out. Colin Sexton's out. He's been out. Lauren Markkanen's out. He also missed last game. But in the absence of these three players, there are some players that would project well in this kind of scenario for Utah. Is this currently some of the best value on the slate? And who is it that stands out the most to you from Utah?
So I'm getting to a ton of Chris Dunn, which I'm going to cut back on because I have 93% currently. I don't want 93% Chris Dunn. I think that he's really, really risky. He's 33% owned. I don't know that I'm going to go like far under the field, but I'm probably going to actually try to get a little bit underweight to the field on Chris Dunn. He doesn't start. The minutes are all over the place. With all three of the studs out, he's not going to get the start here, right? They're going to start THT and they started Fontecchio. Is he going to get the start again, you think?
I presume that we're going to. So I would assume we get the same rotation tonight that we got last game. But okay, what's great is that this matchup against the Kings, super fast paced. Right. There's going to be a lot of points scored. The total is 235. I'm going to read off some of the minutes we got last night, which also might not be entirely telling. The final score last night's game is 144 to 116. It was an absolute blowout. But the starting lineup in that game, it was THT at point guard, Agbaji at shooting guard, and then the front court, we had Fontecchio and Olynyk on the wings, and then we had Walker Kessler as the starting center. By the way, the Kessler, super tilting. I had him for over, I think it was 24.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. He was at like 18 at halftime. Like, this is an easy win. And then he gets in foul trouble to start the third quarter and never checks back in because the game was so one-sided. So he played 16 minutes yesterday. So we can't put too much weight into the playing time yesterday because of the players that were in the rotation of the normal guys, we actually got the least amount of minutes out of Walker Kessler at 16. And then we got guys like Juan Toscano Anderson played 17 minutes off the bench. Damian Jones played 17. So we got 27 out of Chris Dunn. I don't know how much we're supposed to expect from him now today with Lauri Markkanen out, because does he play 27 again? Does he go back to playing 23 to 24? Does he actually end up picking up like 30 minutes? Do they change the rotation because of how much the team sucked yesterday? It's hard to know. Chris Dunn's worth getting to, but I'm probably going to align myself with the field on him. I don't want his unsure minutes to make or break my night.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way as Chris Dunn, because he can obviously spike a huge upside on this 5,600 if he does get the minutes against the Kings. We've got him in for 26 minutes. And as I said, I got to 93% of him projected at 31.5 fantasy points in 26 minutes at 5,600. That's great value, but it's so volatile. And if the field is going to treat it like those 26 minutes are assured and 33% of people are going to get there, I'm with you. I don't think I'm going to take a huge stand one way or the other. I'm probably going to try to close to match the field with Chris Dunn.
Yeah, and it's not because I don't see upside with. I mean, he's fairly popular. I'm playing close to the field on. If I get 30% of Chris Dunn, it doesn't mean I hate him or anything like that. I just, in cash games, play Chris Dunn. I don't want to go out and play like 70% Chris Dunn and then be like, oh, look, he played 23 minutes like he plays in every other game. What an idiot I am. But at the same time, too, if I don't play Chris Dunn, he goes out and plays 30 minutes, to be like, oh, right, they're shorthanded. They needed Chris Dunn to play more. So I just align myself with the field on. I don't have a great feel for his minutes. I like Fontecchio. I played a good amount of Fontecchio yesterday. He put up a pretty big game, and he's a decent scorer. Somebody's capable of taking shots, which is more than we could say about the rest of what's left of this Utah Jazz team. Walker Kessler, also like at center. We got a question earlier about what centers we like. Walker Kessler, I think, is another center that's worth getting to. Relatively cheap price point, a little more expensive on FanDuel, but he gets the added benefit of the defensive stats. And then DraftKings, he is just a little bit cheaper. Now let's talk about the Sacramento Kings on the other side of the game. And so much of this comes down to what happens with De'Aaron Fox. I will say this. If Fox plays, I think he's a great tournament play. People are not going to play 100%. De'Aaron Fox. And he's relatively cheap, at least on DraftKings. FanDuel is projected for nearly no ownership. Fox has a lot of upside, particularly in this matchup. If he plays, he's going to be criminally underowned in tournaments.
Yeah, I'm going to love him as a play if he does end up playing in this game. I'm with you. He's only 8,400. The price is just too low for what we know he can do. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on Fox. If he plays, is going to be a great play.
And we've got some more super chats here. This one is from Trevor Beaver. Just joined. I know I missed the tiers question. I'll read it off for you. DK tiers, tier by tier. The ones I got the most exposure to, Jokic. And then tier 2, I said was Kawhi. Tier 3 is currently De'Aaron Fox. Jimmy Butler, if you're not comfortable with the injury risk. Tier 4, Bam Adebayo. Tier 5, a lot of guys that are fairly close here. I did land on Mikal Bridges and then Aaron Gordon in tier 6. The next super chat is from Pierre. Pierre says, one lineup, only FanDuel, large GPP, top center, Bam, Jokic, etc. That is Jokic for me. If I can only play one center on FanDuel, I would go with Jokic. The next question is from DC24. Greg, Bet365 is Kessler over 2.5 blocks at plus 145. If you guys have watched any of my content this year, you know what to do. Go and slam Walker Kessler. Dude just cashes block prop bets all day, and they've been underpriced all year. If you blindly bet Walker Kessler block props this year, I don't know exactly what you would be up, but it'd be a significant amount of money. Perhaps you'd even be a billionaire, depending on what your bet size is. So go take advantage of the Walker Kessler number at Bet365 and sign up using the link we have below. $1 becomes $365 in bonus bets over there. So it's hard to know what else to make of Sacramento just because we have Fox listed as questionable. But if he's out, Sabonis looks great. Herter looks great. I don't know that I want to mess with a Davion Mitchell start because he's largely been terrible. But Herter, Sabonis, play those guys if we end up seeing Fox out. Anything else you would want to add from Sacramento if Fox does not play?
I probably would play a little Davion Mitchell just because he has had some big games. It's a nice matchup at 3,300. I think that he'll be playable if Fox is out. I'll get to a little bit of Davion Mitchell. I'm not going to like jam him in, but I'll get to, I don't know what the field will be at. We've got him at like 0 ownership right now. I'll probably get to 10%, 15%. I'll have to wait and see how the rest of the news breaks. So I don't really want to say exactly what I expect to do with Davion Mitchell, but I'll get to some, I think, if Fox is out, depending on what other value opens up, I guess, too. But I also think, if Fox is out, I'll probably get to some Harrison Barnes as well. Not projected for a ton of ownership. He'll project pretty well at 5,000 with Fox out. A lot of these guys are just going to look, good enough if Fox is out that I'll want to play some.
Yeah, and by the way, if Fox plays, then a lot of these guys are going to be overowned, and then I would just primarily want to be on Fox in that scenario. He's going to be underowned and everybody else will be over. I don't think Saturday night, people aren't going to be swapping their lineups all that late into the day based on what happens there. Let's talk about more injury news. The Philadelphia 76ers. This is such a difficult situation to parse because as we still have Joel Embiid is questionable, James Harden is questionable. Here's what I think is the easiest way to break this down. If both of them play, I don't really like the Sixers all that much, right? There wouldn't be a ton I like. If Harden is out and Embiid plays, I love Embiid. If Embiid is out and Harden plays, I love Harden. Also, if Harden's out, guys like Maxey, Melton, they would look a little bit better, but they're also kind of priced appropriately at this point. To me, the keys for this game are if Embiid is out, which big man starts in his place? And then on the flip side, it's if Harden is out, I just want to get to a lot of Embiid. But is there anything else from the Sixers that you would want to get to? Let's say everybody's in. Does anything look decent?
If everybody's in, I think I'm only playing Embiid, maybe a little bit of Harden. I will have interest in Embiid, even if they are both in, just because I think he could absolutely smash Bismack Biyombo, Jock Landale. Like, I don't know that they can keep up with Embiid. So I would like Embiid in the event that they're both in. Not like, I mean, he's going to project much worse than Jokic, but I would have some interest in getting to Embiid. 14% ownership looks fair there.
And we've got anything else you want to add from the Sixers, by the way?
No, I think I mean we have to kind of wait and see the news. Obviously, if both are out, then there's going to be a lot of interesting plays from the Sixers. But from a both in perspective, there's really not much interest there.
Yeah, it's this is what sucks about talking about some of these later games. It's they don't start for 2 hours and we have no clue who's going to be playing, which definitely makes it kind of tough. 1.6 asked us in Discord, how are you handling this early game with news pending? I'm not playing very much of it. I'd rather wait for more news. That's how I'm gonna. I mean, a lot of people know this is what I do with a lot of these slates. I think it's the best edge you could play in DFS right now for NBA is just wait for more news and let other people play the chalky players from the first game. They
Yep.
might be good. Yes, Porzingis was very solid yesterday. There're just better options available later. We're doing the same thing today. Let's talk about the other side of the game. And Lippy wants to know, do we like TJ Warren for value? So Kevin Durant's return is impending. Looks like he's going to be back in another game or two, but he is going to be out today. In the meantime, it looks like some people want to be playing TJ Warren because I've seen his name brought up a few times. I didn't project Warren for a ton of minutes. I know there's still no Kevin Durant. I know that there's no DeAndre Ayton, but I think that there's too much being put into what happened in the last game where we got 29 minutes out of TJ Warren. But keep in mind this as well. Devin Booker got into a little bit of foul trouble. He only played 33 minutes. There was also really weird front court rotations. Josh Okogie, who's generally been playing big minutes, only played 20 last game. I would be very surprised if we get nearly 30 out of TJ Warren again. So if you have some exposure to him, cool, but I'm not prioritizing playing TJ Warren. Are you?
Definitely not prioritizing him. He's playable. He's not like so. We've got him in for just 2.4% projected ownership. That does make him sort of interesting to me. So let me see. So we've got him in for just 17.6 minutes. But if I change that to 20 minutes, which is what he played the game prior, he projects for just over 16 fantasy points, which is playable at 3,500, but still not a big priority. So he really does kind of need those minutes to become somebody that you really want to play at 3,500. If you put him up at 24 minutes, he'll project for 19 and a half fantasy points, which is somebody that you would want to play some of on this slate. But yeah, I wouldn't call him a priority by any means. I think he's playable at 2.4% ownership. Kind of interesting there, just because we've seen that he at least can spike a minutes upside, but I'm not anticipating. I'm with you that I'm not anticipating like upper 20s minutes. Wouldn't be surprising me if he does get back to 20 again, as he did in the game prior against the Lakers. In which case he's a fine play, has some upside there, but really needs upper 20s to have real upside.
And I have TJ Warren projected for 16 and a half fantasy points. It gets me some exposure to him. I'm not saying he's an outright fade, but not somebody that I'm going and loading up on. And also, if we end up getting later on in the day, more value opens up. He's somebody that I'm going to end up swapping off of. Not a bad
Yep.
placeholder for more value to potentially open, though.
Good point. Yeah.
And Eric, I see you asking us about Kawhi Leonard. We talk about him in the next game. But is there anything else that you want to be playing from the Phoenix Suns? It's a team where I think there's some pieces that look okay, but just to read off some of the exposures I have right now, Chris Paul's the one I get the most of at only $7,200 on DraftKings. Also, a piece that's going to be easy to swap out if we end up getting more news later. And then I have I've got like Biyombo, Landale, and TJ Warren. These are all like 5 to 10% guys for me that aren't priorities, but are just in the player pool.
Yeah, so I have not done anything to adjust Landale's projection yet. Based like our projection for him, I get him in a third of my lineups at 4,100. We've got him in for 22.6 minutes and 22 and a half fantasy points at 4,100. So looks pretty good point per dollar, but I don't think I'm going to play all that much Jock Landale as a backup center. I think Bismack Biyombo also only played 17 minutes in the most recent game. There's a chance Biyombo gets in foul trouble. Maybe Landale picks up a few extra minutes. So I think he's a fine play, but I don't know that I'm taking a big stand. The field's at about 14%. I'm probably going to end up around there. I really like Chris Paul actually looks really good point per dollar at 7,200. We've got him at 5.1x, 37 projection here at 7,200. Looks pretty good. So I have interest in Chris Paul. Devin Booker only getting 5% ownership. That's actually kind of interesting to me. He doesn't project well at all for us, but yeah, he is so expensive, but he's Devin Booker. Like we know that he can, he scored 70 points in a game, didn't he? I mean, we know the kind of upside that Devin Booker has, and he in competitive games sometimes can really turn it on. So I have interest just because of the 5.2% ownership, not because I think he's a great play. Like objectively, clearly doesn't project all that well. It's not a great matchup with the Sixers, but 5% ownership on a 5-game slate feels a little bit light to me. So I think I'll probably get above the field on Booker.
Yeah. And I don't right now. We'll see. Maybe more value opens up later and is easier to get to. But at least as of now, there's too many pay up options. I prefer to Devin Booker for me to really get there. with any kind of real meaning. And final game of the slate, this is the last start time. New Orleans Pelicans, LA Clippers. There's nothing I really like from the Pelican side of the game because we don't have injury news really here that we're waiting on. And, like even if players get ruled out to make it easier to get to, because we've got close to ceiling price points right now for Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum. Valanciunas has finally come up in price as well. Trey Murphy's really expensive. I don't have anybody projected particularly well here on a points per dollar basis. And even anybody, like if I get to like a 5% Jonas Valanciunas, it's going to end up becoming somebody else once news and more value opens up. So I don't really think anything from Pelicans I'm going to be getting to. Do you see it differently?
I have the most interest in Valanciunas just because he's been playing such big minutes recently. In the 3 of the past 4 games he's played. I'll give you the past 4 games: 34 minutes, 33 minutes, 28 minutes in a blowout against the Spurs, where he actually played some blowout run for some reason, and then 34 against Charlotte. So he's been playing such huge minutes that I can't decide if this is this a trend? Like, are they turning up Valanciunas for the playoffs now? They're playing him more than they have, all year. He's always been a volatile minutes guy, and suddenly the past 4 games, those minutes feel a little bit more locked in. So even at 7,500, even though the price tag has come up, I mean, you put him in for, let me see, if I put him in for 34 minutes at his fantasy points per minute, he's going to project for 41 fantasy points, which obviously we can't project him for 34 minutes. That would be, a mistake to project him that high, but just shows you how much upside he has. At 6% ownership, I do have some interest just for GPPs in Valanciunas.
If it wasn't for him only being center eligible, it would be a different story for me.
True.
But the fact that he's only center, there's just other centers I like more. So didn't quite get there. And now we'll close out by talking about the LA Clippers. And it's another team I don't really get that much exposure to. Before we were talking about Devin Booker. If I had to roster somebody at this price point, I prefer Kawhi Leonard to Devin Booker. But still, as of now, Kawhi was somebody who before I talked about liking for tiers purposes. For just the classic DFS contest, I'd rather pay up for Jokic. I'd rather pay up for, Embiid or Harden if one of those guys get ruled out. So another team here, I get a little bit of exposure to Marcus Morris, a little bit of Kawhi, a very little bit of Russell Westbrook, but another team where there's no real priorities.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do not have any in my latest crunch. I guess I have one share of Marcus Morris in my latest crunch. Of course, I have done absolutely nothing again to their projections. So maybe that'll change a little bit. I'm going to try to get to a little bit of Kawhi, but I think Westbrook actually looked good in the boom bust tool. So let me double check if I am remembering that correctly.
It's hard to, while you look at that, it's hard to know what Westbrook's role is going to be going. First of all, he's been absolute dog shit with the Clippers from a real life standpoint. And the Clippers had the not the best. They had, I think it was like the 4th best 5-man unit in the NBA before they made the Russell Westbrook trade. It was their starting lineup with Terrence Mann. They took Terrence Mann out, they replaced with Russell Westbrook. The team tanked so quickly. They're really struggling to win games right now. It's very much related to Russell Westbrook not being able to space the floor in the same way that Terrence Mann is, and then Mann also probably being a little bit better of a defensive player at this point in their careers. But now that there's no Paul George, I don't know exactly what Westbrook's role is going to be, but there's an opportunity for him to just have the ball in his hands a ton and play a really big role. It's hard to know last game what his role actually would have been because, all right, he plays 30 minutes. He puts up 38 fantasy points, but they won by 22 points over the Thunder. If the game was competitive, were we going to see 34 minutes out of Westbrook? Would it have been 36? Would it have still been 30? There's also been some games where they closed Terrence Mann over Russell Westbrook. I'm interested by the upside of Westbrook in tournaments, right? I don't know what to expect. I know there's a ceiling though, and nobody's playing him right now.
Yeah, I've been playing him. I played a good amount of him in those Thunder games. Was pretty disappointed in the outputs there. He has just not been good. But yeah, I'm with you. He clearly has the upside. I guess his fantasy scores have not been that bad in those recent games against the Thunder, 33 and 38, but not good enough to pay off this kind of price tag. But I'm with you. He's interesting just from he definitely has a ceiling standpoint. So I'd say Kawhi and Westbrook, I have some interest in playing. I'll play a little bit of Marcus Morris. Zubats, I feel like his minutes have been so down that it's really hard to trust Zubats. Doesn't mean he's not playable because he's always been a guy who just will randomly have big spike games. But I don't think I'm necessarily getting there just because we have so many other center options that I like here. So yeah, for me, it's mostly Kawhi. I'm going to try to get to. I have him about 17% in my most recent lineup. I think I'm okay with that. I'll play a little bit of Westbrook and nobody else that I have much interest in.
And Good timing. We made it right to lock. See, so a couple things too about the timing of the shows. And by the way, because Eric's tears, I saw that he messaged me and said that he didn't mean to slight us in any way with his super chat before asking about the pacing of the show. But I knew the last game of the slate was not one that we were going to really have that much interest from a DFS standpoint. And listen, we had the time to kill. We had 5 games to talk about and an hour and a half to do it. And we are now past the hour mark. We're currently at lock. If you guys have not done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't leave. I know some of you might want to leave, but this is going to be an important one. Well, I don't want to promise it's going to be an important one to stick around for because we might go through the next 30 minutes and no injury news comes out. And we're just sitting here with our thumbs up our asses waiting for that injury news. But the injury news might come in the next 30 minutes. And you guys should stay here just in case it happens. Neil and I are going to be talking about some prize picks plays. Be looking through the tools that we have on the site to find the best options over prize picks. But also, if we do end up finding out that the Sixers guys said or anything else happens on the injury report, De'Aaron Fox, we'll be covering that as well. So, Neil, what are your rooting interests for tonight?
That is a good question. I mean, I've still got 40% Bam out of bio. That's right. That's where I landed on Bam. So I'm clearly cheering for Bam. Yeah, my lineups are not very finalized right now. I think that I'm probably going to be above the field on JVal. I think that is a risk that I'm going to be taking. I guess I'm rooting for Harden or Embiid to be ruled out so that I can, that's my biggest interest. I'm rooting for some players to be ruled out so that we can benefit from saving roster spots.
That's, that's been my rooting interest a lot of these recent slates and certainly at the end of the season, because from a fun standpoint, I hate these end of the season slates. I don't want to be, it's a Saturday night. I've got people over here. It's my sister-in-law's birthday party. We've got people hanging out, watching college basketball, having a good time. You think I want to be sitting in my office waiting for the Sixers to update their injury reports? No, but I'm a grinder, so I'm going to do it anyway. And I sure shit better be rewarded for it. I'm not wasting my Saturday night sitting here for no injury news to come out.
No.
So I'm with you. We got the same rooting interest.
Yeah.
Also, college basketball. What's happening in the college basketball games?
I don't know. I don't have any live brackets remaining, so I stopped paying attention.
All right. We've got FAU is up 64-63 on Kansas State. I did bet FAU +2. I thought that was an undervalued team. So there we go. We've got them up 1 with 6 minutes left in the game. I also end up with them I'm still alive in the survivor pool on DraftKings.
Ooh, really?
It nearly impossible though. I don't
know what that means. What is the survivor pool?
Yeah. So the way it works is you start with the tournament. All the teams are on the board. You have to pick one team each day and you can't reuse any teams.
Okay.
So you get to the end, then you only have to pick one team for the Elite Eight, one team for the Final Four, and one team for the finals. So I've come to realize you get to the end here and you need so many things to go your way because you just don't have that many teams left.
Yeah.
So it gets really
hard. I wish that I was aware of the survivor pool because I would have really enjoyed that. It would be a fun way to watch the games.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. So and the other thing too, it is winner take all. It is $251,000 to first place and nothing to anything else. So there's
51. Damn.
Yeah. So there's how many? There's like 250 people left or something like that at this point. And I'm rooting for FAU. I switched my pick to almost every single team that I had left over at some point today. And I realized that all of it was luck based at this point and that nothing I settled on was going to matter. Because no matter who you pick, you need your team to win. You need the other teams you left also win. You need other teams to lose. What ultimately is probably going to happen is, well, if my teams actually make it through, is I'm going to get to the final if nobody left to pick.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that, Tilt. By the way, some injury news that is of interest for tomorrow, but still wanted to bring it up here because I think it's a big one. Damian Lillard is out. Anthony Simons is out. Jeremy Grant is out. Nurkic is out. I would be very surprised if Dame plays again this year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you want to take your victory lap on Dame because you called that before it was like being reported. I mean, they had reported that they were thinking about sitting him down depending on how things go after like 5 games, something like that. But I think you called it before anybody else did.
Yeah, I'd said I don't think Dame is going to play again this year. And not only that, I doubled down. I said, not only that, it is going to propel the never-ending talk about where will Damian Lillard play next year. And the answer is ultimately going to be in Portland for the Trailblazers.
Most likely, yeah. You know what I did with your prediction? I went and bought myself a Ryan Arcidiacono so rare, a few Ryan Arcidiacono so rare cards.
Hey, he's going to start, I think, for the finish of the season. Now, unfortunately, like last night, they're going to get the shit kicked out of him a lot of games, and he's not going to play in the second half a lot of those spots.
True.
but he does have the opportunity. So with Dame also, the other thing that if I'm him, I would be so annoyed about this. No matter how many times he tells the media that he doesn't want to be traded, he wants to stay in Portland. That's where he wants to finish out his career. He must have done a million interviews saying this at this point in his career. It's the only question he gets asked is people ask him where he wants to be traded to. Does he still want to stay there? He has to deal with it every single day. And there's nothing he could do that makes people think otherwise. Last offseason, do you know who Henry Abbott is?
I do not.
He's a writer for ESPN. He's bald. He wears glasses. He's got like a really pointy head. I don't know if that helps you identify who he is. But Henry Abbott reported that Damian Lillard had requested a trade and was going to sit out of training camp if the Blazers didn't trade him. Damian Lillard refuted that on Twitter. He said that is not true. They argued about it. They got into an argument about whether he wanted to be traded or not. And the public agreed with Henry Abbott and said, oh, Damian Lillard wants to be traded. And then he never got traded.
I missed that.
Yeah,
I see Kat saying that Dame actually does not have significant trade value anymore. He's too old.
So I would say he had more trade value at one point in the year, but somebody would trade a significant amount.
Absolutely. Yeah. He has huge trade value. Yeah.
Like, could you say how much more trade value would, like, think how much Rudy Gobert was traded for in the offseason?
I don't want to think about it, Greg.
Do you
all
know
about Walker Kessler, Rudy Gobert to the Timberwolves?
Because Rudy Gobert isn't especially young either. If Rudy Gobert on what needed to be a max contract is going to get that kind of haul as well, like Walker Kessler, 5 first-round picks, Dame has trade value.
Yeah.
And once again, he doesn't have trade value to every single team. It only takes one. Same thing with the Rudy Gobert thing. Would other teams have traded that much for Gobert? Maybe not. But by the way, I'm going to add one other thing, a betting angle, because we're about to talk about some bets also. I keep saying I'm going to add one more thing, but we're here for another 30 minutes, right?
Yeah. Keep talking.
You're going to be excited about this.
Yeah.
I placed an NBA futures bet this morning. Would you like to take a guess
to win the championship next year?
No, to win the championship this year.
Wow.
They're 200 to 1 right now. I've been on this. I've been saying this for a lot of the season. And this is why, if anybody's watching, you want to take a flyer on a really, really long odds team, there's a lot of ceiling, I still think, with the Timberwolves. We have not seen them be healthy for all intents and purposes once this entire season.
Right.
Because the start of the year, I get they had the full team out there, but Edwards was not the Edwards of now. I don't know what the deal was with Anthony Edwards at the start of the year. Maybe he was hurt. Maybe he was banged up. He also might have just been out of shape, because he is considerably better now. Not even the same player now that he was at the start of the year. This team is really interesting to me when Edwards comes back and he's fully healthy. And then we also get Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns some reps. It's 200. It's 200 to 1.
I think Cat was also not fully healthy coming into the year. I don't remember I think he was like sick for a while coming into the season, and he was not playing all that well. Plus, they didn't practice together at all before the year. So I'm with you that is good value, even apart from them being my team and me really just hoping it to be true.
And the other thing too, because I know people are going to be like, hey, Minnesota's not going to win. But they're 200 to 1.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think the fair odds are like 100 to 1.
Yeah. They're probably not going to win.
Yeah. Probably not going to win. But I think there's value there. And the other thing too, super easy to hedge if they just make it into the playoffs and end up winning a few games there. Maybe they win a series or something like that. We got a super chat from Bilbo Swaggins. How's that for a name? Bilbo Swaggins. Bilbo. There used to be somebody whose name in chat, if I'm not mistaken, there used to be somebody whose name was Dildo Baggins.
That's a great name.
Which was also a really funny one.
Yeah.
If anybody goes into porn, it's a name worth considering. But Bilbo Swaggins wants to know, does Kyrie get a max contract this offseason? I doubt it. It depends what you mean by max. Could he get a 1-year deal for a lot of money? Is somebody going to commit a 5-year contract to Kyrie Irving for all that money? Do you want to, Neil? I know neither of us have, $300 million. But if you had $1 billion, would you be willing to commit a couple $100 million of that to Kyrie Irving? Is that a reliable investment?
Yeah, no, that is not an investment that I would be making. And generally, people who have $1 billion have probably made some good investments in their time. So I don't think they're taking that risk either.
Yeah. For people who think that the Minnesota Timberwolves at 200 to 1 is a bad investment, imagine what they would think about Kyrie Irving, giving him, I don't know what the most amount of money. Let me look this up. Kyrie Irving.
All of the Blazers are out. You see that tomorrow? Tomorrow. It's tomorrow. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
all
Don't
of
get
them are out
excited.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out what the most he could sign for in the offseason is. His last contract, by the way, was 4 years, 136 million. And I know he's eligible for a certain percentage increase on top of that. Okay, here it is. He is eligible to sign a 4-year, $198 million deal. Fuck off with that. No chance.
No.
Nobody's giving him nobody's giving him a 4-year, $198 million deal. Right? You hear, because I don't even know what it's going to be. Somebody gives him that contract. I can't even fathom what is going to happen from there. But it's going to be like 3 weeks into the contracts, be like, he's decided to pursue fishing.
Yeah,
like it's going to be something so outside the box that you can't even predict, because the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs of Kyrie Irving, it's insane. It's something crazy would happen that wouldn't even be predictable.
Yeah. James Naismith, don't say that. He thinks Luka's going to retire within the next 5 years. Man, I hope not. That'd be a bummer if Luka retires that early. I got to tell you something that I did tonight, Greg. I usually don't play cash games, right? Mm-hmm. I loved my XFL lineup that I made so much for the showdown slate tonight that I played cash tonight. I played a bunch of different cash contests, 50-50, double up, whatever. And then I didn't play it in the GPP, and it's currently crushing all of those 50-50s by like double-digit points. So I don't even want to know what it would be doing in the GPP.
You should have just thrown it into the GPP.
I planned to, and then I crunched out exactly how many lineups I had, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to play the lineups that I crunched out, not worry about like recrunching or deleting one. So I hope I don't end up regretting this decision.
And by the way, somebody bringing up Andrew Jennison in chat, very funny. Kyrie's going to pull a Steve Peterson and retire. So there was a UFC fighter who retired after a loss earlier.
Today, that's right.
Yeah, I listened to it. Nobody gave a shit about him, but there was just the fight canceled by the UFC, and like, oh my, we've got airtime to kill. They just let this guy who nobody cares about talk for like 10 minutes about how he was retiring. And at the end of it, he thanks Michael Bisping and says, "Hey, Michael, I know we've had some bad blood back and forth. We said some negative things about each other, but I want you to know, like, I appreciate you being here." And Michael and Bisping just goes, "I wasn't aware of that.
It's news to me."
Yeah. He's like, funny. I didn't know. But Bisping's like, I don't even know who you are. I've never seen you fight before. So that's what'll end up happening at UFC fights because they were already short on time as well, because they had the 2 other fights got canceled. So this was actually originally supposed to be a 14 fight card. A fight dropped out last week. Then this week at weigh-ins, 2 fights dropped out with this one post lock. So terrible pace card. Usually when we're doing this show, I'm just being honest, I'm usually just watching the UFC fights while I'm talking. I haven't anything to watch. There's been the hour and a half we've been here, 1 fight has happened because of how bad the pacing is for the card. Let's talk about Prize Picks. If you guys haven't signed up at Prize Picks yet, go ahead and use the link we have below. Because like we've been saying here, if you guys want to get the cheapest way to get access to all the tools we have at Stochastic, sign up using Prize Picks. You're going to get 1 free month of Stochastic plus Platinum when you use our link, and up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. Something else to consider, also the Stochastic Hall of Fame. If you guys finish at the top of a tournament, this is another just cheap way to get access to our tools. Use the Stochastic avatar on your FanDuel, DraftKings, wherever you play DFS. Use it on your DFS handle. And if you finish at the top of the GPP, add us on Twitter at StochasticHOF, and you get 1 free month of Stochastic plus Platinum. So some good ways to get cheap access to our tools. And as we're talking through this, I'm bringing up our pick'em projections. Do you have this in front of you yet, Neil?
I do have them in front of me. I want to say right away, I did a VOD on this earlier. I like the under on 12 rebounds for Giannis, just because Denver is such a good rebounding team. Giannis already averages like 11.5 rebounds per game. Now he's in a tough spot against Denver. We haven't projected for just over 10 rebounds in this game. So I really do. That's one of our top bets on the board, is the under on 12 rebounds for Giannis. I like that bet quite a bit.
Also, sorry to circle back on this, but I missed that. We have to go back because I'm not going to drop, as we're talking about some betting here, I'm not going to drop the Timberwolves thing. And producer Jacob DM me, said, also don't forget that Mike Conley is on the team.
True.
And to me, I'm not going to say that Mike Conley is significantly better than D'Angelo Russell at this point in his career, but I do think he's a better fit with this version of the Timberwolves than D'Angelo Russell was, especially because D'Angelo Russell and Rudy Gobert apparently hated each other.
Yeah, and especially with Cat back, like we have the offense, we have the shooters. We don't really want D'Angelo Russell to be out there chucking it. We'd rather have Mike Conley distributing to Ant and Cat.
And let's see what we have going on in the early game as well, because everybody knows you got to tilt once you're 14 minutes into the first game of the.
We're really only 4 minutes in, probably.
Oh my god! So yeah, the game is barely started. Bam Adebayo did score the first bucket of the game though.
Oh hell yeah, it's on.
Pretty good points. 1 minute into the game, he's got 2 fantasy points. Pretty
Ooh,
good.
Not bad.
Two fantasy points per minute. That's a good start. All right. Let's see what else looks good to me here. I agree with you, by the way, on Giannis. It's a good.
Balakar asking if Harden out Fox, McCollum, or Westbrook. I think I would go with Fox there if he's in.
Was that a super chat or
no? Sorry, just ask me.
Okay. Yeah, I was just making sure I didn't miss anything. Let me double check Discord as well. Nothing in Discord. If anybody has questions in Discord and you're still watching at me. All right, well, looks good. Got our projections loading. We have so many Bucks unders that look good, by the way. Almost all of our top projected bets are unders for the Bucks. We've got Giannis under rebounds as our number 1 prop. Number 2 is Brook Lopez under points. Number 3 is Drew Holiday under assists. Number 4 is Giannis under assists. How comfortable would you feel playing a parlay card that has a bunch of unders for the Bucks?
I mean, it is pretty nice correlation, assuming that it's not. I would be hesitant to do it if it's like all rebounding props only, but like there is obviously correlation if there's a blowout in the game, if it's just a slog of a game. There's some correlation there intra team. So I don't know that I would do all of these, and it's also I guess we can do 3. Our top 3 bets are all different Bucks, so we could do the under on Giannis, Brolo, and Drew Holiday. I think I'd be comfortable with that one.
Let's see what bets we could find from players who are not the Bucks. Right? We don't want to sit here and tell people like, "Hey guys, take 10 bets and make them all Bucks players." Yeah. There are some other ones that project decently right now. I would be hesitant to look at any of the unders for Domantas Sabonis or Kevin Huerter, at least as of now. But here's a note on these. If we end up finding out that Fox plays, Sabonis under assists looks good, and the Huerter points under looks great. 16.5 points is a massive number for Huerter if Fox ends up playing. What is he averaging per game this year? Huerter this year per game. Also, the potential for a blowout in that game as well. All right, Huerter is averaging... Yeah, Huerter's averaging 15 points per game. So you start to factor in that if the game ends up being a blowout and the fact that, 16, here's what the 16.5 number looks like to me. It looks like a hedge on Fox being in or out. Right. I would say if Fox plays, take the under on Kevin Huerter points. If Fox sits, take the over on Kevin Huerter points. How's that for a game plan?
Yeah, 100%. But you got to be quick because I'm guessing it'll be pulled, within a couple minutes.
PrizePicks is a little slower. Like PrizePicks isn't as fast as like a FanDuel or a DraftKings or anything.
Okay.
Some of these pick'em operators, which is what we're calling, the NHAs of the world, the underdogs, PrizePicks, they're a little bit slower. It doesn't mean you could sit there. It doesn't mean, the news could come out, you could go out, make a sandwich, take a shit, get a beer and come back and then fill it out. Like you got to have some urgency, but I do think you could beat some of these lines before they come down at PrizePicks if you do react to just the news of him being ruled out.
Yeah, for sure.
By the way, Michael Knack saying, Bam underwhelming. Is he? What's happening now? Oh, we're now 3 minutes into the game and he's still at the 2 fantasy points. Oh, no, he's got a turnover as well.
It doesn't really matter because Cam Johnson has ended the slate already.
Oh, my God. Cam Johnson.
11 fantasy points in just 3.5 minutes.
Which that was why I asked you to make sure that we're talking about the right Cam there. Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas. We should just double back and be like, no, we meant Cam Johnson.
Yeah, I meant Cam Johnson, actually.
This is an absurd game. Yeah, Cam Johnson in 3 minutes has 8 points and a steal. 3 of 4 from the field. He's doing everything.
Slate over.
Yeah, there's 19 points scored in the game. He has 8 of them. What happens if the entire game keeps up like that? He's going to score 40% of the points scored in an entire game?
It's looking that way.
Interesting. People freaking out about Bam. Oh, Bam rebound. He's back in the game.
We're back up.
All right, there we go. We back, guys. We back. The other one this applies to, by the way, I talked about Kevin Huerter. The points for him is 16.5. I like the under if Fox plays. I like the over if Fox sits. Sabonis, I don't know I'd play over 8.5 assists if Fox is out. I don't mind the under 8.5 assists if Fox plays, though. I know that Sabonis has been racking up triple doubles. That's a big number. Then we've got him projected for 7.6. Is there anything else you see outside of the Milwaukee Bucks that you like getting exposure to?
Yeah, so I kind of like this under on 9.5 rebounds for Ivica Zubats. His minutes have been so volatile. He's been playing like low 20s in minutes. We have the under hitting 54% of the time. So I kind of like taking that under on 9.5 rebounds. We actually have him under just barely under 8.99. So just under 9 rebounds. But I like taking that under on Zubats.
Yeah, where do we have Zubats? Yeah, let me see what I've got here for Zubac. Zubac's another guy. I mean, whose minutes have been harder to predict this year than this guy?
Yeah,
all over the place.
I know.
Look at some of the recent games.
Maybe they need him against Joe Val. They keep him, but they have Plumlee now. Can also match up with Joe Val.
Won't put too much stock in the last game because it was a blowout. He played 24. The game before that, he played 19. So listen to this 3-game stretch. By the way, Fox was just ruled out. Ooh. So go take that Kevin Huerter over. And we can now react to this and we can start building out some lineups and make adjustments. So we'll talk about that news. But really quickly, Ivica Zubac's the last 3 games. Just talk about how much variance there is in his minutes. 24, 19, and 34. That's his playing time in the last 3 games. Yep. I mean, good luck trying to project that. Let's talk about the Kings now. De'Aaron Fox is officially out. We got this news in advance. Talk about the implications of prize picks. Go out and play Kevin Huerter overs, particularly on the points. But from a DFS angle, let's look at, do you have the on-off court numbers pulled up in front of you? If not, I'm doing it.
No, I'll do that.
Yeah, let's look at who really benefits. De'Aaron Fox officially out today. You know what's also nice about this is now we have surefire value spots to get to. And this is going to allow us more flexibility if more players are ruled out later. Sure. Now I feel great, by the way, that I don't have a bunch of like the Heat net guys.
Also, they're not doing anything. So that helps.
That too. Also helps. Other than Cam Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Kevin Love, 2 points and 2 rebounds and an assist. Cool. I don't feel like I need that right now. Bam Adebayo. I do have some of Bam. He's at 2 points, an assist, and a rebound. Hero's off to a decent start. Jimmy Butler isn't. Bridge is doing nothing. So let's go. Now the fun starts. We start to roster the real guys on the slate. De'Aaron Fox, taking him off the court.
Malik Monk gets a 4.2% usage boost. Extra 3.38 fantasy points. No, sorry, nearly 4 extra fantasy points per 36 minutes without De'Aaron Fox. And we'll get a minutes bump. What's his price tag?
His minutes are also all over the place.
Yeah.
There have been some slates where Fox is out and I go play a bunch of Malik Monk and his minutes go down for some reason. And then you get these random games where Fox is in and he's closing and he plays a bunch of minutes. I wouldn't play Monk in a cash game. Tournaments, I think there's upside there that gets added.
He's such a good fantasy point per minute guy. And you like theoretically, he should get more minutes with De'Aaron Fox out. So I actually already had some Malik Monk. I didn't even realize it, but he's 4,800. We've got him in for 21 minutes right now and 23 fantasy points. He's going to look even better without De'Aaron Fox. So I imagine I'm going to get a good amount of Malik Monk.
Some super chats coming in right now as well. This one is from Mr. Cool Cam 97, top 5 plays for a FanDuel single entry. So let me look at my FanDuel lineups. And this is going to be a little bit different because of the Fox news that we just got. But I'm going to, what's the price point? Malik Monk's at 55. He's going to be my player pool. I don't think he's going to be one of my most rostered players.
Yeah.
But these are the guys that I like overall the most on FanDuel. THT is somebody who I think makes a lot of sense for FanDuel purposes. Still like getting to Chris Dunn for sure. Jamal Murray, another one. Harrison Barnes, I think, is pretty interesting on FanDuel. Harrison Barnes should benefit from the absence of De'Aaron Fox. He's only 5,100 on FanDuel. So I'll say him. And then Russell Westbrook is another one. 7,900 for Westbrook on FanDuel. So a lot of the players for this slate are actually more expensive on FanDuel than they are on DraftKings. Russ is an exception, $300 cheaper. I like getting exposure to him on FanDuel. So Mr. Cool Cam, hope that helps you. And we got a super chat. Chris Williams, great show as usual, playing DK Showdown, Pelicans, Clippers. Who are you guys' favorite captains and super cheap plays as price makes it hard to jam in the upper tier plays? Tied for first last night in Showdown. Thanks.
Nice.
Thanks to your great plays. Oh, there we go. Thank you for the super chat. Let me build lineups for that because I don't have that built out, Chris. But I'll just upload my projections, run lineups. It'll take a few seconds here. It won't take too long for me to get that going. While I'm doing this, Neil, any staggering updates from the first game of the slate?
Good question. And I'll answer. So I'm not going to run a crunch or anything, and I don't really play Showdown. So I'm not, your answer will be better, but I'll just say off the top, like, I don't think you're probably still not going to get too much Joval, and he's a player that I would have some interest in Showdown, just because I do think the upside is so immense on a 1-game slate that he's going to be interesting. Cam Johnson's still at 11 fantasy points, still has the flame though, so still crushing it, but has not scored a fantasy point in 3 minutes now, I think maybe 2 minutes. But leading the slate right now, Tyler Harrow up to 8.25, Gabe Vincent 7.5 fantasy points. Bam still sitting at 5, Kevin Love at 4. Nobody you really want other than Cam Johnson right now.
All right. I'm not done running these lineups yet for Chris, but I am working on it. And don't worry, I'm going to make sure that no matter what, we're going to answer this in the next couple minutes, certainly before we sign off for the night. But I've just got the lineups crunching in the background for the Pelicans Clippers game. And once again, thank you, Chris, for the super chat. We do appreciate it. As those lineups are running, let me check Discord to see if we got any other questions in there. Nope, just the @ from News God telling us that Fox is out and my lineups are done. So the captain spot, I still end up getting, you're going to like this actually, Neil. The captain I got the most of was still Kawhi Leonard, even though there isn't all that much value in the game. My second most rostered captain in the crunch I ran, Valanciunas.
Really? Okay.
It does help that there's the positions don't matter in Showdown.
Right. True.
Because I don't project Valanciunas poorly or anything like that for the main slate. It's really just an opportunity cost with him being center only eligible.
Mm-hmm.
For this type of mode, I think he looks great. So I got to a lot of Valanciunas as a captain, got to a lot of him in the utility spot. Kawhi, overall, the captain I got to the most. Russell Westbrook, I like quite a bit for this. And then as for other cheap plays to help you build out your lineups, Chris. So on the high end, I said I like Kawhi, I like Valanciunas, Westbrook, cheapies. Marcus Morris, Josh Richardson, and who's the other one? Let's see, what are the price points? Najee Marshall is somebody I got to. What's the salary on Marshall that had me getting to him here? Oh, he's only 3,600. So I only have him for about 15 fantasy points, but at $3,600 for a 1-game slate, that's perfectly reasonable.
Nick Harris says, y'all said last time before to not play Mitchell, yet he was optimal. I don't think that's true. I don't think I ever said don't play Mitchell. I remember us majorly screwing up when you and I both, I think, locked him in and he was absolute dog shit.
Months back. So to be fair, I do not play. So the first Davion Mitchell slate this year, if I remember correctly, I played a bunch of them. I have not really played him since. Maybe you played him last time. I didn't.
I probably was not on that show with you because I think I recall the last time Davion Mitchell was in and he was like 2% owned. I had like 20% and he did pretty well.
Yeah, I didn't play him that day. Some other results from the early going so far. We've got Cam still at 8 points, an assist and a steal now. Nets are down, but this Nets team is so inconsistent. Like, I don't get them. And this is a fairly tough matchup against Miami, but there are times where, you see the Nets on the road against the Bucks. They'll be 12.5 point underdogs. They just win the game or they're competitive outright. And then they'll play the Pistons and they'll just lose. They're very inconsistent. They got interesting pieces. Yeah, no consistency there.
We got some projections updates if you want to hear them from De'Aaron Fox.
Let's do it. Let's wrap. So we'll finish with this right here. What are the updates with De'Aaron Fox being out? Who projects the best for us from the Kings?
Yeah, so we moved Domantas Sabonis from 50 fantasy points to 54. So he looks pretty great now. He's 10,200. He's another playable center. Looks good. I mean, we have so many. Like, he doesn't become some kind of slam dunk, but he looks a lot better with that 4-point fantasy boost. We moved Trey Lyles up a fantasy point. I'd say the biggest movers are Domantas Sabonis. We did move Keegan Murray up from 22.74 to 25.2. So at his price tag, that actually makes him a much better play. Kevin Huerter up to nearly 30 fantasy points now from 26. Harrison Barnes up to 27.24 from 23.77. So a lot of pretty big movers here. Malik Monk up to 26.81. And then Actually, I'm not seeing it in the change log, but I know we moved Davion Mitchell up to just shy of 21 fantasy points at 3,300. That's pretty nice.
Yeah. So I think all those guys, a lot of added value right now from the Sacramento Kings. I'm happy we reserved some lineup spots, waiting for the news to come out. So guys, if you haven't done it yet, make some swaps to those lineups and be on the lookout for the 76ers injury report. At least as of now, Joel Embiid is still questionable and James Harden is questionable. That's going to do it for Neil and myself. If you guys haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.